Hello, and thank you for joining our webinar today, The Operational Use of Technology to Navigate the ICD-10 Change Using the SmartSheet10 Technology. My name is Dr. John Juliana, and I'm very pleased to host this webinar for you today. Before we begin, just a little bit about myself. By trade, I'm actually a podiatric physician. But I also have a master's in healthcare management, and that's given me the privilege of being able to consult with practices, both large and small, over the years. And today what I'm going to do is give you some insight about this very daunting change that we're facing come October 1st of this year, not only through the eyes of an actual healthcare provider, but through the eyes of a healthcare consultant as well. Today you're going to see the difference between ICD-10 readiness, ICD-10 tools, and a true ICD-10 solution. In my mind as a consultant, it's only the solution that's going to allow you to circumvent the two hurdles associated with this very challenging change. Those two hurdles are, of course, finding the most specific code in the translation of ICD-9 to ICD-10. But the second hurdle is the one that is grossly underestimated and can cost your practice enormously, and that is the workflow. If your workflow is not set up for this change, the cost associated with the workflow disruption is going to be just as bad as the cost associated with sending claims out that might not have the most specific ICD-10 code associated with them. So you're going to see how only a solution can mitigate both code specificity as well as the workflow. By far, all experts definitely agree that this is going to be the most daunting change any living physician has ever endured. So we have to make sure that we understand the basics of ICD-10, which I'm certainly going to cover throughout this webinar, as well as how we can leverage technology to really enhance this change. Let's first review a little bit about what exactly is happening on October 1st. I think there's many who are confused about what this ICD-10 change really means. On October 1st, the method through which we code our diagnoses as outpatient facilities is going to change to the 10th edition, which is ICD-10. It's not going to affect our procedure codes, the CPT codes. So I'm often asked, John, are the modifiers that we use going to change in the world of ICD-10? And of course, they're not. Modifiers are associated with the CPT side of the claim, not the ICD side of the claim. So it is going to affect the way we code, and certainly there are vast differences between ICD-9 and ICD-10. For example, in the world of ICD-9, our codes are all numeric characters. For the most part, there are some exceptions about that, but for the most part, they are numeric characters. About 3 to 5 characters in length, and there's approximately 13,000 ICD-9 codes. Come October, we're going to be facing a world of code sets which are alphanumeric in character, 3 to 7 characters in length, and there's approximately 69,000 of these codes. So you see how this can create a hurdle in getting to the most specific code, because as we move forward, I want you to remember that it's essential that the most specific code be used or your claim will likely get rejected. That's where the cash flow challenges begin. As a consultant, in my mind, there's a couple of ways that we can search for that most specific perfect code. Now, there are 3 methods. The first are books. As you'll see, there are 21 chapters associated with the ICD-10 books. By far, I strongly recommend this is the method you avoid. Books are not going to meet the workflow challenge, and when you think about the opportunity cost, the human capital cost of searching through 21 chapters for each of these codes that you see on a daily basis and the most specific form of that code, you can see how that cost really begins to climb, and it's a very expensive means of navigating this change. Then you have tools, and we'll cover some of these tools. The most common tool is known as a gem mapping program. The tools are much better than the books because they do at least provide an electronic means of searching for that most specific code. But they are still not doing anything about the workflow. They still disrupt your workflow. Then you have the solutions, and in my mind as a consultant, it's only the solutions that should be used, and that's what SmartSheet10 provides for you. The solutions not only get you efficiently and effectively to the most specific code, but they do so in a very workflow compliant manner. So we're going to talk about those solutions. There are 21 chapters associated with ICD-10. I'm not going to bore you with those chapters, but suffice it to say those chapters are broken up into the organ systems that they basically elaborate upon. Searching through these 21 chapters, again, very, very time consuming from human element. Now, I'm sure you are all very familiar and have seen these rather humorous anecdotes about how specific these codes can actually get. But this is actually an ICD-10 code. It's getting sucked into a jet without causing damage to an airplane. And how this could ever happen to somebody and have them present into an outpatient facility, I have no idea. But nevertheless, this is actually an ICD-10 code. If we look at these codes, you have probably also seen how ridiculously specific they become. For example, if you were a luggage cart driver who got sucked into that jet without causing damage to the airplane, that adds a character to this code. If you're a male, it adds yet another character. If you're under 5'5" in height, yet another character. Slightly bald, yet another. And wearing a short sleeve shirt, yet another. So you see how these can build to 7 characters. And the most important part about this humorous anecdote that I want to speak about is how your documentation must meet the specificity of the code you have chosen. CMS has said that in about a year after the implementation of ICD-10, they are going to begin pre- and post-payment audits. Other carriers, of course, will follow. So we have a little bit of a grace period to get used to ICD-10. The documentation is critical. If your documentation does not match the code specificity, you are likely going to be asked for money back, or your claim likely will not get paid in a pre-payment audit. So start documenting right now as if we're living in the world of ICD-10. Some other differences. Laterality is very important. If you're a specialty that relies upon side of body, orthopedics, like my profession, podiatry, ophthalmology, optometry, laterality is very important. And you'll see how the SmartSheet10 technology navigates that very easily for you. Another hurdle are injuries. Injuries are grouped by anatomical site, and most often injuries require what's known as a unique 7th character. As an example, let's take a look at a fracture code. A fracture code, or generally any trauma code, requires also the specificity associated with whether or not this is an initial encounter, a subsequent encounter, and are these fractures healing routinely or delayed or in a non-union or malunion. There's specific codes for these. And then lastly, are they a sequela? By sequela, it means that the fracture is associated with some other condition. So for example, if this fracture was associated with osteoporosis, it's a sequela fracture. So this presents yet another speed bump in how we code and making sure that we're using the most specific code in order to get our claim paid. So obviously books are not the answer. Now let's take a look at tools. The most common form of tool are known as the General Equivalence Mapping Program, the GEM programs, and there's lots of them available online. CMS provides them. The problem with general equivalence mapping programs occurs when there is not an exact match. If there's an exact match from ICD-9 to ICD-10, a GEM mapping program, generally very efficient in getting you to the most specific code, although remember, it does nothing to help you get through the workflow complications of this change. But if there's an approximate match, the GEMS mapping program can really leave you out in the cold. I often use the analogy that a GEM program can get you to the neighborhood that you need to be in. It might even get you to the street of that neighborhood, but it often fails to get you to the correct house, the exact address. And it's only that address that's going to get your claim paid. So these tools, while better than books, are nowhere as good as a true solution that we're going to be talking about. And the workflow of a true solution is what really matters the most. Not only drilling you down to the most specific code, but as we move towards October 1st of this year, we're about to face a workflow disruption that's far greater than what meaningful use did to us or PQRS did to us. In the world of meaningful use and PQRS, non-compliance simply meant that you're going to suffer a penalty or you're simply not going to receive that incentive you were counting on. But if you fail in the world of ICD-10, that speed bump becomes a brick wall. You simply will not get paid. So it's essential that we really take ICD-10 very seriously because very simply, your cash flow depends upon it. You need to get paid. Now you might be wondering, well, if the claims get rejected, so be it. We'll just rework them and resubmit them. Well, if you subscribe to the actual statistic that the longer it takes a claim to get paid, the more likely it is that it will never get paid, then you can understand the problem with claim rejections. And this is an actual statistic. If you look at claims that are out there for 30 days, you'll see that you have almost a 90% chance of getting them paid. But look what happens as time progresses. The longer it takes a claim to get paid, some of those claims will never get paid. They will never get reworked. They'll fall through the cracks. You might hit timely filing. So it's essential that we take claim rejection very seriously because ultimately that's what's going to create the cash flow crisis that everybody is warning about. And that's where the solution of SmartSheet10 technology can help you. So let's take a look at the solution that I've been referring to, the SmartSheet10 technology. And before I do, I want you to keep in mind the workflow that I'm going to continually reference about this technology. For those of you who are a fan of my favorite TV show, The Profit, and I know many people are very familiar with the sister show called Shark Tank, but following Shark Tank is The Profit, and it's hosted by a CEO known as Marcus Lemonis. He's actually a venture capitalist, and he goes into floundering businesses, and he analyzes them and basically resurrects them and, of course, becomes an equity shareholder in that process. When he goes into a business, he principally looks for three things: people, process, and products. And generally in any floundering business, one of these three things is the root cause. It's either a people problem, a process problem, or a product problem. I will tell you again through the eyes of a consultant, as we face October 1st, we're not going to be dealing with a people problem. We're not going to be dealing with a process problem. We're going to be dealing with a process problem, not a product problem, a process problem. And that's where we need this technology to really make it flow efficiently, getting us to the most specific code. Again, before I show you some demonstration of the SmartSheet technology, I want you to remember that, number one, it's a very intuitive program, very easy to learn and to use. And it's also what we call EHR agnostic. It means that it can be integrated into any electronic health record and used for any specialty. The codes are derived from the CMS database of codes. So if there's an ICD-9 code, there's going to be an ICD-10 code, or it simply hasn't been matched yet. So no matter whether you are an orthopedist, a podiatrist, a chiropractor, a dermatologist, ophthalmologist, it can be used for any specialty, and it can be integrated into your electronic health record system, as I'm going to demonstrate some today, and you'll see how that really makes your workflow optimized. What you're looking at right now is the database of the SmartSheet10 technology. On the left-hand side of the screen is the search engine, if you will, where I could type in any ICD-9 code, or I can type in the words associated with an ICD-9 code, and it will immediately take me on the right-hand side to the chapter of the book which translates it into ICD-10. So I'm going to start by using my familiar world, since recall I am a podiatrist. I'm going to start by demonstrating this through the world of podiatry. If I knew my ICD-9 code for hallux valgus, which happens to be a bunion deformity, and I typed in 735.0, it immediately takes me on the right-hand side of the screen here, it immediately takes me to the exact chapter of the ICD-10 book where hallux valgus is located. Notice that it first takes me just to the chapter, which is black. I have to click until I come across the green codes. It opens up into these green codes. That's when I know I'm at my most specific code. So the SmartSheet10 technology is actually color-coded for you. As I open this up, it tells me these are the green codes. I see that actually unspecified is a code, but I know better. I know that I have to choose right or left. Once I make my selection of right or left, it then automatically puts it on top here as a green code, and if this was integrated into my electronic health record, it would have automatically populated the claim invoice for this patient. Before I move to the next slide and show you what else the SmartSheet10 technology does, I want to point out the word inclusion term here. The SmartSheet10 technology does not only get me to the most specific code, it not only helps my workflow because it's integrated, but it also serves as an expansive resource library for me. If I were to open up this tab of inclusion term, it would actually tell me exclude two codes. In other words, what codes can I use with this hallux valgus code? What codes can't I use with it? So it serves as an expansive library right at my fingertips. But that's certainly not all the SmartSheet10 technology does. If, for example, I had a patient with an ankle sprain and I knew the ICD-9 code of 845.0, I type it into my search engine on the left-hand side of the screen, it takes me immediately to the chapter of sprain of unspecified ligament of ankle. I click it until I find the green codes. It opens up to the green codes, but when I make my selection in this instance, an alert pops up telling me that this requires a unique 7th character. I have to document and code to the specific level of whether this is an initial encounter, a subsequent encounter, or a sequela. Only after I do that does it automatically populate the 7th character for me on top here, and this code is ready to auto-populate my claim invoice if this was integrated into my electronic health record. Again, if I didn't know the ICD-9 code, that's not problematic. I can type in anything here as well. In this instance, I typed in fracture metatarsal, or I don't even have to type the full word. It begins to open up for me right to the exact chapter on the right-hand side of the screen where fracture unspecified metatarsal is located, and with simple clicks, it opens up into the green codes. And in this instance, once again, when I make my selection, it immediately again alerts me to the fact that this requires a unique 7th character. Is this an initial, a subsequent, or a sequela? Is the fracture healing routinely, or delayed, or non-union or malunion? Only after I make that selection does it populate the unique 7th character, and I'm confident that this is the most specific code and this claim is ready to be paid. And that's still not all this very innovative technology does. One of the things that makes this technology so innovative is its patent pending Smart Super Bill. Remember, we talked about in the world of the profit, people, process, and products, and how the process is about to be completely disrupted come October 1st. Most facilities start their revenue cycle management through the use of a cheat sheet or a super bill. That's about to be completely disrupted as we move towards this daunting change. But the SmartSheet10 technology brings that capability back for you. It allows every provider, even of the same practice, to create their own unique smart super bill in literally 10 seconds. So if you look at the right-hand side of my screen, what I've done here is I've created my own custom super bill based on my 6 top diagnoses. I could have chosen my top 20, my top 30. It wouldn't matter. For the sake of simplicity, I chose only 6. If you notice, if I click on dermatophytosis, suppose I had a patient with dermatophytosis of the foot in front of me in this encounter. Using my Smart Super Bill, if I click on dermatophytosis, notice how the entire line is green. Again, it's color-coded for me. It tells me that there's a 1-to-1 match between ICD-9 and ICD-10. So all I need to do is click on my Smart Super Bill, and it automatically populates my claim invoice. Again, this being integrated into my EHR, it automatically populates it for me. And notice what it's doing. It's dual coding for me. It's populating both for me so that I can select whether to send this down with an ICD-9 or an ICD-10 code. Remember that while ICD-10 starts on October 1st, it's the true date of service that determines whether or not you send this claim with ICD-9 or ICD-10. For example, it might be October 15th, and we're now in the world of ICD-10. But if I'm reworking a claim whose date of service preceded October 1st, I can't send that claim down with ICD-10. I have to have the ability to send it with ICD-9. And that's why dual coding is so important. Furthermore, not every carrier will be ready for October 1st. Most are, but not every carrier. Therefore, you have to have the ability to dual code, and the SmartSheet10 technology does that for you. So that was an easy example because I had a patient with dermatophytosis, and it's a 1-to-1 match. But suppose another patient came in with hallux valgus. Again, using my Smart Super Bill makes it so easy for me. It's right there in front of me. If I click on hallux valgus, notice it's yellow. It tells me there's not a one-to-one match. But by clicking on it, what happens is it takes me once again, as you saw before, to the exact chapter of the ICD-10 book where I simply have to click and open up until I find the green codes, select the laterality, and it populates the invoice with the most specific code. Again, it dual populates ICD-9 as well as ICD-10. Very simple, very intuitive, very workflow compliant. Now, I demonstrated only through my world, the world of podiatry, so I'd like to show you very quickly how it absolutely works no matter what specialty you are. If I were a general surgeon, on the left-hand side of my screen here is my provider custom super bill that took me just seconds to set up with my favorites. If I had a patient with abdominal pain come in, I click on my smart super bill, I see that it's yellow, but by clicking on it, it takes me immediately to the chapter of the ICD-10 book where abdominal pain is located. But notice it stays black, and up on top, it's actually in red, warning me that I'm not yet at the most specific code. As I continue to click and open up the windows, I see that I need to document and code to the specific level of where this abdominal pain is located. Upper quadrant, lower quadrant. Once I make that most specific selection, everything turns green. And I know I'm at the most specific code. It could auto-populate my claim inside my EHR if it's integrated, and I'm confident now that this claim is ready to be paid. If I was a pain management specialist and I had a patient with reflex sympathetic dystrophy, again on the left-hand side using my smart super bill, I click on that particular portion of the super bill. It takes me immediately to the chapter where complex regional pain syndrome is located in the ICD-10 book. Notice how still it's red up on top. I need to click until I open up the green codes, and it's telling me that I need to code to the specific level of right limb, left limb, whether this is an upper limb or lower limb. And once I do, everything turns green. So the SmartSheet technology is not allowing me to make any mistakes. It's taking me right to the most specific code. If I was a hematologist and I had a patient with pernicious anemia, again, I use my smart super bill. It takes me right to the chapter of vitamin B12 deficiency. I click on it until I open up the green codes. In this instance, it's telling me that I actually need to code to the level of the root cause of the iron deficiency anemia. In this case, the patient might have intrinsic factor deficiency. Only when I select that does everything turn green, and I know I'm at the most specific code. And lastly, if I had a patient with placenta previa and I'm an obstetrician, using my smart super bill, I click on it, it opens up to the exact chapter of the ICD-10 book, and in this instance I realize that I need to code to the level of specificity to document the trimester that the patient is in. And only when I do that does everything turn green. So again, the SmartSheet10 technology is helping me find the most specific code to get my claim paid. It's mitigating the workflow challenges associated with this daunting change, and it's serving as an expansive resource of these codes at my fingertips. I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration of the SmartSheet10 technology, as well as some basics behind ICD-10. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. If you would email sales@smartsheet10.com, I would be more than happy to speak to you or to answer your questions by email. Once again, thank you for joining this webinar. I hope you found it very useful.